Okay, guys, Darth checking in with you again. Welcome back. Let's talk about the Wheel of Time. So, episode 7. Episode 7, I'll go ahead and tell you, this is not going to spoil anything from the series that you haven't already seen in the episode, so you're not going to get any, deep book spoilers or anything like that. Still dealing with my cold. That's okay. So, I am going to talk about one difference, but I'll tell you right now, the difference that I'm going to talk about is the way that Machin Shin is portrayed, and it's not going to spoil absolutely anything for you. So, yeah, let's jump into it. This episode went largely as I expected it would. There were a couple of things that were more divergent than I thought they would be. Not from the books. I know that we're way off track there, but from my expectations, right? Because I knew that there would be places they would go that I wouldn't foresee coming, but I didn't think that they'd go as far with them as they did. And we'll get back to that. We'll come to that in a little bit. Let me start off by saying that I thought that the intro scene, a little over choreographed, but really cool. We got to see a lady in white clothing. We don't even know what she is yet, so I'm not going to bother with talking about that. But we got to see a lady in white clothing with spears just trounce a bunch of armored soldiers. This is distinctly not Game of Thrones. They just want to reinforce that for you. But I thought that was a neat scene, and she was pregnant and having a baby, and then the guy with the hair-marked blade wields it against her, and we get the flashback to it later in the episode. We learn that that's Tam, young Tam, which, he looked pretty good for young. Something about Michael McElhatton's face just has a weariness to it, right? And they couldn't hide that too much, but yeah, I was intrigued by this. Just a bunch of Irish people, a bunch of Irish people on the screen. And that was a cool open. From that, they did what I thought that they weren't gonna do, which is that they jumped right over to the ways and started immediately talking about, why can't you just open the gate back up? And Moiraine, kind of deftly moved past that. The show had some one-liners in this that just killed me. Loial asked for patience, and in the background you hear somebody mutter, if he wants us to be patient, we're all going to die. It's just hilarious. So they're doing a good job with comedy. It's not MCU humor, MCU humor. But they're doing a good job with that. I like that a lot. They got out of the ways a lot quicker than I expected. This is probably my first critique of this episode, and I'm going to do a full season review and talk about this a lot. So the short of it is that things need to happen so that the plot can develop, and it feels like they want this to be character-driven instead of plot-driven, which is cool, because by and large, the series is character-driven, and they want to capture the heart of the series, not the heart of the first book, right? But so much of that plot in the first book sets up the rest of the series that I wish they weren't just snapping through it quite as quickly. In this case, the ways are not particularly important to the book series. It's not like we needed to spend a bunch of time on them, but if we were going to spend as little as we did, it feels like maybe they shouldn't have been there at all. But then I think if they weren't, they would have got fussed at by fans, so it's like damned if you do, damned if you don't. But it's just clearly not where the writers and production is feeling its strongest, when they feel like they have to shoehorn in something from the books because it has to be there, So they just sort of breeze past it instead. and we didn't get the feel. We didn't get the ominous vibe, the how long are we going to be in here, the claustrophobia of it. Machin Shin in this was, I think, butchered. It looked like a swarm of bees that came by and was like, "You're not pretty." It did that kind of thing, right? And in the books, Machin Shin is the old tongue for the black wind. It should have been like a dark cloud rolling in. And if you got touched by it at all, I was surprised that people got surrounded by it and Nynaeve was holding it off. But if you got touched by it at all, you went immediately completely insane or you died. The whispers infected you, and it either tore you to shreds and drank you, basically, or it drove you completely mad. And those whispers just, took over your mind. So, I don't know. I was surprised by that difference. I'm very hesitant to say that new things are bad, because my gut reaction is to go, oh, that's different, I don't like that. And that's an unhealthy way to respond to new things. So I'm going to give it a second watching before I am more judgmental. But I will say that between what I just described and what we got on screen, I think it is clearly okay to say that it's not as potent, and that it just, that takes away from it. I expected, I don't want to say a Trolloc battle, because that was pretty book accurate, but this trip, sure, it goes, 1,000 miles in 2 or 3 days, but in the books it does still take 2 or 3 days. I felt like we were in the ways for 20 minutes. I felt like the guys got in there, walked to the first place that they could get out, and went, all right, we're leaving now. And in the middle of that, a couple of things happened. That didn't sit with me super well. And it's going to be a critique of mine when the series finishes season 1 and we come back and talk about the season as a whole. It's just how they've handled some of that stuff. So, moving on past that minor qualm. Can't talk this morning. Moving on past that, we get into Fal Dara. Another thing that kind of bugged me, Lan was not super well received. You learned in this episode that Lan was set to be a future king. Almost the Aragorn path, right? The land that was going to be his, that he was going to be the king of, got swallowed by the Blight, which we saw what the Blight was like. Very different to what I imagined it to be, but super cool looking. We learned in this episode that Lan was basically raised from birth as a king without a land, and that there are other people that wear the same headband he's got, called a Hadori, by the way, and that they are still true to that kingdom, and that they greatly respect him, etc. And in the books, and again, I'm not trying to get into anything spoilery here, just this is little tweaks of differences, right? He is about as respected as a person can be, because everybody knows his story. You can't pass a peasant on the street corner that doesn't see him and go, that's Lan Mandragoran, the king without a throne. He's that kind of character, right? So it's like if Aragorn walked into Gondor. So it was weird to see Agilmar, the lord of that land, being rude to him. It was, or to Moraine, which is basically the same as being rude to him. It was a strangely less warm welcome, and I don't understand why it was changed, because they have quite a good friendship in the book series. there's some stuff like that I've been trying to pick apart, like what the purpose is, and usually I get it. That one I don't get at all. The only other thing that I'll mention like that is the feud scene between the Emmons Fielders. Here's an example of one that I do get. There's not a feud directly like that in the books. Doesn't have to be. What it did was it reinforced the kind of conflict and the way that each of those characters handles that kind of conflict. And then we saw them still coming together at the end. I think that's fine. It's a little TV tropey, but there's nothing inherently wrong with doing that, because you don't have 100 pages and an hour's worth of material to delve through to get to understand how these characters would respond to this sort of adversity and their internal monologues and thoughts, etc. I thought that argument was fine. It put people where they needed to be, and it gave us the characterization we needed, and it did it in a few beats, right? So that's an example of the good and the bad on that. Kind of both ways that it can go. Okay, those things out of the way. Let's talk about a lot of positives, because there were a lot of positives in this episode. I liked that we got to see a Trolloc again. I liked that we're back to action in general. The stuff with Mach and Shen, the stuff with the Dark One still hunting them. It was nice to feel like we are done with the politicking and now we're back to the chase, right? Moiraine sending a message and putting the Red Sisters down to hunt Mat, that's brutal and calculating in a way that I love. Similarly, her telling Lan that she wasn't going back for him because she knew which way he would choose if he was the dragon. That's great. She wants to have him in her pocket for later. That's awesome. Actually, I just really like her character in general. She's got another funny one-liner here. They're both tall and they're both brooding. She was fun this episode. Rosamund Pike, actually, she just lends a lot of weight to the whole thing. Daniel Henney getting that scene with the little family was great, with the Hidori, and that kind of led us into learning more about his backstory. I really liked that. And Nynaeve trying and failing to track him this time was really nice. I predicted that they were going to have their first kiss in this episode, and they did a whole lot more than that. And I thought that was awesome. This was, did he mask his bond when he did that? I don't know. Hopefully Moiraine did. That'd be awkward otherwise. But, yeah, I was glad to see that relationship taking off. I felt like it's been there for several episodes. They've been building up to it, doing a good job of that. And, yeah, I'm happy to see that finally kind of turning into something. We'll have to see where it goes from here. But, very cool on-screen character development happening. Feels very natural. Egwene teasing Nynaeve about how her bed's completely made up was fun. And then we got our big reveal. Actually it was right before that scene, but we got our big reveal. We saw Tam being carried by Rand. We saw him thinking Rand was Carrie, his dead wife. I don't know if a show watcher understood super well what that was, because I don't know if they set up Carrie particularly well. It will probably make a lot more sense on a second viewing. But Rand believes that he is the Dragon Reborn, and that's really interesting. He apparently can channel. We saw from his perspective the weaves weaving around him, and there was the black of the taint going with it. So very, very interesting. I'm excited to see where it goes from here. Oh god, there was something in that it like hit me for a second and then it was gone, and I really want to come back to it because it felt important. For the life of me, I just don't remember. But, oh, yes I do. A lot of people have been saying that Rand had really strong Hayden Christensen vibes, and that's totally accurate to what he should be like as a character. So I am stoked to see that move forward. One thing I'd like to point out for you, if you go back and rewatch these episodes, now that you know who Rand is, and what his significance is going to be, you can see a lot of instances where his broody persona is actually him recognizing that he knows something the others don't know. He's been keeping that quiet for a while. He definitely is aware during certain crucial scenes where he's talking to somebody else. Just really good acting there. Very subtle. Yep. Alright, what else can I chat on here? I thought Men's Visions were cool. The way that they showed it, that was some of the better CGI in the show, actually. She would see like a shadow or a double of the person, and one would look like the real them sitting where they are, and the other would be like over here with yellow eyes or something like that. Just kind of lean away from the main one. That was neat stuff. I want to see a lot more of her character. I don't know where that's going to go, but I'm very fond of that. Overall, this is a really good episode. It's not incredibly deviant from the major plot points of the books. And the ways that it is deviant, I'm struggling with a little bit, because honestly it feels like they gotta pick one. They gotta either go completely away from it, or they gotta get closer to it. And I do think that either one of those would be a really strong show. I think that this is a really strong show. I just feel like right now the duality of that, the sort of, well, I don't need to define duality, but, they're being pulled in two different directions, right? And I think that is where a lot of pacing issues are coming from, and I think that it would clean the show up a lot to have a little more confidence in going a direction and being faithful to that direction, equating to what they're adapting. So I'm going to give this an 8. I think this is a solid episode. I really do. I am very excited about the next one, which is probably the highest praise I can give to an episode. And the smaller things that are bothering me about it, I recognize are not down to the episode doing something wrong, other than maybe a little bit of pacing trouble here and there. But it's not cinematography, which is gorgeous. It's not music, which is great. It's not the actors who are doing a wonderful job. It's not the storyline playing out poorly, because I think that's great. I think it's just a little bit of editing and a little bit of timing and pacing. And I wish that we had more time to develop certain ideas. So I don't think that I can detract from the score too much for that, given how well everything else is going. So 8 for now, and I will talk to you guys about this in more depth once I get to rewatch.